Can the Miami Heat escape the play-in tournament this upcoming season? We'll break down how they should approach the regular season and our predictions in the Eastern Conference on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and subscribe on YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. If you haven't checked out all the great content from this week, we joined Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic for a crossover episode comparing the Magic and the Heat. Did a little bit of prediction work on that episode that went up on Thursday. We talked about the Heat's biggest training camp questions. We ranked which young players on the Heat have the most star potential. You can find all of those episodes up on YouTube and in your podcast feed. But today, we're asking the question, are the Heat a lock to make the playoffs? So the last time, David, that the Heat missed the playoffs was 2019. But they were a game, maybe a quarter away over the last couple of seasons from missing the playoffs because of the play-in tournament, right? So we'll look at their competition in the East, make a prediction in a minute, but I think we just need to talk first about how the Heat approached the regular season these last couple of years. And to me, I think it's clear they have not proven that the regular season doesn't matter. And they need to take the regular season a lot more seriously and make things easy for them in the playoffs.
Without a doubt. We've talked about this a lot, and it all kind of stems on Jimmy Butler, and I know that's a lot to ask from him. And it's not just Jimmy, of course, but I think he's going to set the tone early on for what the season's going to be like. Whether it's a good one or a bad one, I think he has to be able to make the regular season more of a priority than it's been in the past. And I know that's asking a lot of him as he's getting older, especially given the kind of performances we've seen from him in the postseason. But at the same time, as the team's leader, as the team's best player, and expecting to get paid a whole heck of a lot of money, not just this season, but beyond that, you kind of have to go out there and prove it. You said it before. You want to get paid like a superstar, you got to go play like a superstar. And I think it absolutely applies to Jimmy and his approach to the regular season. Overall, just the team has to stay focused on making sure that every win, every game matters. And whether it's taking steps in the right direction, understanding how to build chemistry, getting better as a young group, all these different factors, and finding ways to win games, because the Eastern Conference might not be viewed as deep or as strong as Western Conference opponents, but at the same time, going through the possibility, there's a handful of really bad teams in the East, and of that I don't think there's any doubt. But other than that, it's pretty even from 1 through 9. Like, I think you can make a strong case that maybe 1 through 8 has a good chance. Like, maybe there are tiers among them, but even still, even amongst those teams, those tiers rather, like, there are teams that I think can be competitive, even if they wind up having one of the lower 4 seeds in the Eastern Conference. So I think there's a lot at stake for Miami, and they have to be able to approach every game with a renewed sense of intensity and focus.
Look, they were a game out of avoiding the play-in tournament last year. If they avoid the play-in tournament, Jimmy Butler doesn't hurt his knee, and maybe we're talking about something completely different right now, you know?
Sure.
They're 3 games out of being the 3 seed. Like, you could say that and be like, well, you know, it's not a big deal that they were in the play-in tournament. They were only 3 games away from being a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. My argument is, no. That means every game matters, because it is that close, to your point, David. Like, these teams, we could tier them and we could do all these things, but if it's going to be that close together, then all these games matter, and you got to take it really seriously. And Miami last year got out to a really bad start, right? Like, and we talked about, hey, is this going to kind of put them behind the 8 ball? This is going to be a lot of games to come back from. How much? It just felt like the entire season we were talking about, oh, wow, the Heat finally got to 500, and then they would drop back to below 500, and then they would work their way back up to trying to get above 500. They were just sort of chasing their tail all season long. And so they do need to take, particularly these first 20 games, a lot more seriously than they did last year. And you said before, it's not all on Jimmy Butler, or maybe it's a lot to ask of Jimmy Butler. I would disagree. I think it is all on Jimmy Butler. He is the guy who sets the tone for the team. And it's not a lot to ask of Jimmy Butler. I don't care that he's going to be 30, 35 years old. We don't give these other star players a pass. If you're in the NBA and you're getting paid like a star player, then you're going to get treated as such. We don't let Steph or LeBron or Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid or whatever, who's a little bit younger than Jimmy Butler, obviously, but we don't let these guys just sort of be like, well, I'm old, so just wait. Like, LeBron James has more playoff accolades than Jimmy Butler does. Anthony Davis has a ring. Jimmy Butler doesn't. Like, Steph Curry, obviously, and his resume is, maybe top 10 all time. We don't let them just like, even with a stronger postseason resume than Jimmy Butler has, we don't let them skate. We don't let them off skate free in the regular season. They still have to perform because it's their job to get their team into the playoffs. And so I don't believe that we should just give Jimmy Butler a pass because he's done great stuff in the playoffs before. And that kind of gets me to my next point too about Heat fans or this idea that the Heat don't care about the regular season. It is so counter against what the Heat supposedly stand for, right? Like, and Heat fans embrace this too. Like, we get these comments all the time, David, you know this, but it doesn't matter in the regular season. Just wait until the playoffs. We dominate in the playoffs. Playoff Jimmy, blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, but this is the same fan base that loves having the Heat culture, hardest working, grittiest, ugliest, meanest team on the court, but only for a couple of months out of the year, right? You can't be the hardest working team out of the year if you're kind of lazing off for 5 months of the season. Like that, those things don't go together. And so my plea to Heat fans is hold this team accountable. It's not just about the playoffs. They have not cracked some magical code. They are not part of some secret club that the other 29 NBA teams are not a part of, where the regular season doesn't matter. The regular season does matter. Now, being the 1 seed versus the 4 seed, maybe that doesn't matter, but we've also never had an NBA champion that wasn't a top 4 seed in their conference. And so I'm just going by history here. That stuff does matter.
I don't think it's a team-wide ethos. I really do think it's Jimmy Butler.
I'm with you.
And I don't even know that it's necessarily that he doesn't care. I think I've said this before, in an in-game scenario, at least Jimmy, when he first joined the team and when he was arguably at his very peak, and he was able to measure the course of a game. I'll never forget. Maybe I wasn't entirely familiar with Jimmy Butler's game and what he was capable of on a game-to-game basis because he was in Philadelphia or Minnesota or Chicago, And then when he joined Miami, and when you could look around that roster, I mean, Goran Dragic was okay, but he was getting older. Bam was in his first year starting. Tyler Hero was a rookie. There was a roster, which is why the move to Miami was kind of pilloried around the nation, and people were mocking Jimmy for retiring, et cetera, whatever. The point being that he took that first year, and I'll never forget being able to see him on a nightly basis, every game. Like the approach that he would take, kind of taking a step back. Do I need to get everybody going? Do I need to look active on defense right away? Do I need to start taking over the scoring load right away and kind of imposing my will? I'd never seen anybody do that as effectively as LeBron James did when he was with the Heat.
Yeah.
And I know that seems hyperbolic, but I think it's 100% true. Like, Jimmy was that good where he could take the measure of the game and kind of define what it was required of him, and he would provide it. And I think he's still, to some degree, on a macro level, doing that just over the course of the season. I think he takes a step back consciously, hoping that Tyler, Bam, etc., step up and fill the void. And so I don't know if I necessarily agree that as a superstar we shouldn't let him off the hook, with your point previously, but I do think it's somewhat purposeful. Is it wrong?
I think it's different where the way Jimmy used to do it, or even LeBron James still basically does it for the most part, is, well, I'll bring the ball up. I'm still gonna set the table, but I'm gonna let other guys eat. Where Jimmy, for so many possessions, just stands there and doesn't do anything. And that, to me, is the difference. It's not a points per game thing necessarily, even though I would like to see an improvement in that, number 2. But it's also like, are you helping your offense at all? And even defensively, we didn't see it as much either. Like, his steals were at a Miami Heat 10-year low last year. Like, he wasn't as engaged defensively as he usually is either. So there's ways to do it. But I don't think last year, I didn't read last year with Jimmy Butler. I thought he was just disengaged. There's a way to be engaged but not selfish. I thought he was just totally disengaged. And to your point, was waiting for Bam or Tyler to step up and fill that void, but it was different than he had done in the past. And I think it's just asking too much of those guys.
But that speaks more to roster construction, and
Oh,
then
sure.
if that's
Yeah,
the
he
case,
probably thought he was going to be playing with Damian Lillard. So, I mean,
if that's the case, though, like asking Jimmy to take on that heavy a scoring load for 82 games, it might be too much. It might be too much to ask him to do that and then expect the kind of heroics that we've seen from him during playoffs games. It's a difficult balance. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be.
He just needs to do it. But he didn't last year. That's sort of my point. Is like he struck the balance 2 years ago and 3 years ago. Like I don't think he's ever been like this regular season juggernaut in the regular season. I don't expect him to be. But he needs to be better than what he was last year. Like last year, the balance just went too out of whack into him not caring about the regular season. If he could be that guy for 65 games out of the year, 60 games out of the year, that's still 20 more games than he was engaged in. Because I know he played 61 games last year. He mentally showed up for maybe 40 of them. And that's just not enough. So he didn't do a good job of striking that balance last season, would be my argument. All right. So that's basically the approach that the Heat have to take. Which teams are clearly in a higher tier than the Miami Heat with or without an engaged Jimmy Butler? Who is their main competition in the Eastern Conference? We'll talk about that after this on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Sports. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less, and also me and David. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on Locked On NBA, we're talking about things that we love and things that we hate about the contenders in the NBA. The Miami Heat not considered among that group according to FanDuel. We went by the FanDuel odds to make things easy. But speaking contenders, I look at the East. I think the same 10 teams from last postseason are going to be the same 10 teams to make the playoffs or the play-in tournament this season, David. I think there's a pretty clear have and have not, has and has not in the Eastern Conference. It's the 10 teams that are going to be in the postseason, and then there's the 5 teams that are, tanking for Cooper Flag, basically. So I think they're going to finish in different orders. I think that all that can be different, but I think it'll be basically the same teams in each group.
I think I've got one discrepancy overall in terms of their overall record, but yeah, I could see your point, though.
What is it? Charlotte over Atlanta?
No, I've got Toronto over Chicago.
Okay, so you've got Toronto and Atlanta as like maybe the last 2 teams into the play-in?
9-10, basically, yes.
Weird like little subplot to our podcast here, David. I think you've always been higher on Toronto than me, and I think I've always been higher on Charlotte than you, and I think we've both been wrong for the most part.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, Toronto. I don't know. I'm trying to think.
You've always had a soft spot for them.
They had to. You know what it was? I really liked the Kyle Lowry era Toronto Raptors where they were gritty and fun and everything else, and they had that championship and all, and then it all just kind of fell apart over the last couple of seasons. So maybe you're right. Maybe we
should track that a little bit more closely. Like, what are the teams that you and I have like weird, like unreasonable biases towards? Like, for some reason, I'm just always like higher on the Hornets. I don't know why, but I am.
I try cool uniforms.
Cool uniforms. I they have guys that I like on that team, but I never like really consider
Who?
that they're always
Like,
hurt.
who else other than LaMelo and Brandon Miller? Like, who do you see on that
Now,
roster?
not
We're
so
like, oh,
much. Yeah, not so much. But like in the
I was
past, like I
struggling
was
to
always
find
like
out, like, who
a Kemba
I mean,
Walker guy. I kind of like Gordon Hayward for those couple of years. Like I don't know. I just
yeah, that's
they have a
fine.
bunch of guys who I overrate, and I admit that.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
I'm not picking him to make the finals or anything, but all right. So here are my tiers. I broke them down. You can tell me where you disagree. Tier 1, Boston Celtics. They're by themselves. They've earned that. They will be there until something else happens. That's where they are. Tier 2, I have the Sixers, the Knicks, and the Bucks. The Bucks, I think I'm a little bit higher on than consensus. I think people are just sort of overlooking them right now. They still have Giannis, last I checked, who might be the best player in the world in any given night. So they're in that tier with those other two teams. Do you disagree with me so far?
No, right, spot on.
Tier 3, this is probably where it gets interesting. I have the Pacers. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They at least deserve this. The Cavs, who have plenty of problems, but have been a regular season wins machine over the last couple of seasons since they acquired Donovan Mitchell. They're in here. I've got the Orlando Magic. They won the Southeast Division last year. We talked about them with Philip Rossman-Reich on our crossover episode. I think they've deserved to be here. And I have the Miami Heat. I have the Miami Heat in the same tier as the Pacers, the Cavs, and the Magic. We could talk about where these teams rank within that tier, but do you disagree with me with any of those teams being in that tier?
Nope, I think that's pretty spot on so far.
Any teams that I'm missing?
No, I think that's the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference. And again, to varying degrees, and a lot of different things could happen over the course of the final standings, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But
Right.
as far as tiers are concerned, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great point. Like, this is not a prediction in where the teams are going to finish. I just think qualitatively, like, this is where I think of them in my head in terms of where they stack up. So tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, not necessarily as interesting. We could throw them all in one tier, and I really wouldn't care. But tier 4, I've got Bulls and the Hawks. Tier 5, I've got the Hornets and Raptors. Maybe you put the Raptors in the top in tier 4. I wouldn't have an argument. It's not worth arguing to me. And then you have the 3 teams that are clearly tanking in the Pistons, the Wizards, and the Nets in the bottom. So those are those teams. We could set them aside. The interesting thing to me about this is that we go back to tier 3, the Heat, the Pacers, the Cavs, and the Magic. As long as everybody stays healthy and nothing wacky happens, and the Celtics, the Sixers, the Knicks, and the Bucks, we consider them maybe playoff locks. And that's our big question, is whether or not the Heat are a playoff lock. That's what we're kind of exploring on today's episode.
Yeah.
To me, those top 4 teams are. 2 of the teams in tier 3 then are going to be in the play-in tournament. And if you're in the play-in tournament, by definition, you are not a playoff lock. So it feels like 2 of the Heat, Pacers, Cavs, and Magic are going to end up in the play-in tournament. And that's kind of what's crazy here, because I think if you polled each of these fan bases, each fan base would say, well, there's no way we're going to be in the play-in tournament. Look at our resume, look at our star player, look at our coach, look at our roster, like whatever. But the reality is 2 of them are going to be in the play-in.
I said the point in the first segment. I mean, it's a lot more tightly contested than people are giving it credit for. And whether it's quality wins or anything, I mean, you look at what Miami was able to accomplish last year. 46 wins isn't bad, but it was just enough to be a play-in tournament team. And I don't know they can necessarily escape the play-in tournament, even if they are significantly better this year. You know, there's going to be a lot of stiff competition between the Magic, Pacers, and Cavs there. And again, yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, those are the 4 teams that are kind of, they have, I would say, more glaring weaknesses than the teams at the top 4, I think, or at least in Milwaukee's case. While Milwaukee certainly has glaring weaknesses, they've also got a huge strength in Adebayo, and I think that's certainly something that sways them in their favor. So you look at this group, that 4, 5 through 8 seed possibilities, and it's not easy for the Heat. No. Like, it is not a cakewalk for them to just be, if they can't. That's why we said the point in the first segment. They can't afford take games off, because if they do in the Eastern Conference, just by sheer bad luck or something like that, they have to take each and every game so seriously. And I don't know that it hasn't seemed like they've been that kind of team, I guess, since a couple seasons. I know they won the 1 seed a couple of years ago when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. But even then, honestly, it felt like that was just a really good team, and they could afford to kind of not play at full strength, and they still wound up winning a lot of games.
that was a weird season because that was the COVID impacted season where the Heat were playing like Kyle Guy a bunch of games and teams were missing guys because of COVID related illnesses and stuff like that. And there was like a December to January where every team was basically just their G League team. And I argued it at the time, but I remember saying like this was weirdly the perfect season for the Heat to grab the 1 seed because if any team was going to thrive in that kind of atmosphere and environment, it was going to be the Miami Heat team, which just tend to win games with a bunch of nobodies all the time. And so just give them more nobodies and give the other team a bunch of nobodies. And that kind of gives the Heat the advantage. So they do need to take this more seriously. And like I said before, if you're the Pacers, you're sitting here looking at this competition and saying, well, we were just in the Eastern Conference Finals. We have a superstar ascending in Tyrese Halliburton. We've got a full year now of Pascal Siakam. Our roster is only better. Our coach is great. Yeah. We just made this great run that we're going to build off of. We're not going to be in the play-in tournament after going to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they'd have a great point. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they have an argument here where, hey, we got a new coach, right? That's going to make a huge difference for us. And in terms of starting five, I don't think anybody in the end in the Eastern Conference outside the Celtics and the 76ers can claim to have a better on paper starting five than the Cavaliers. Now there's obviously fit concerns and things like that, but the talent, they have like 4 all-star caliber type of guys, depending on if Evan Mobley ever kind of turns the corner. And then the Orlando Magic are another team that's basically on the rise here and won the Southeast Division and have a lot to feel good about. And so the Heat, obviously, the argument there is, well, we won 46 games last year. And we were as injured as any team in the playoffs all season long. It's sort of a miracle that we won 46 games. Nobody's giving us credit for that. We still have Jimmy Butler. We still have Eric Spoelstra. We still have Bam Adebayo. We still have this great team. We can't be in the play-in tournament for the 3rd year in the row, and yet here they are. Like they've been in the play-in tournament 2 years in a row. The Pacers haven't. The Cavs haven't. The Magic haven't. And so they're sort of the incumbents in terms of being a play-in team. So I think the competition is pretty stiff. Let's make some predictions about where the Heat will finish after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Oh, I've lost my copy here for a second, but that doesn't matter because I can tell you that BetterHelp is a really great opportunity for you if you're looking to try something new. You know what? It's so difficult. Something that you'd love to learn because when you're an adult, making that time just gets harder and harder. It's one thing when you're a kid, you don't have the responsibility of work. And it's like, you know what, you could just sit down, lose yourself in a book or an activity or whatever. Next thing you know, you just pick it up. And, frankly, it's easier for kids to do than it is for an adult. But you're learning and growing as adults. Sometimes you lose that curiosity. And if it's something that you want to gain back, well, guess what? You can reconnect with that sense of wonder through therapy. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible and suited to your schedule. Really easy to use. You get matched up with a licensed therapist after you fill out a brief questionnaire. Only takes a matter of minutes. And if you have to switch therapists at any time for any particular reason, no charge at all. You can just make the switch. It's as easy as pressing a button. And next thing you know, you can switch therapists. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you can get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Last show of the week here. Thanks for joining us all week. Let's jump right into my predictions, and then I'll see how that compares to your predictions for how this thing shakes out. We're going to disagree. I know that already. Should I go 1 seed to 10 seed? I think that's more interesting.
No, that's not fun.
10
seed, or you're not 15 seed? You're not going all the way down?
No. Who cares? We'll do the postseason teams.
I suppose.
All right. At number 10, I've got Charlotte. Number 9, I've got Atlanta. As my play-in teams, I've got Orlando, and I've got Indiana.
Oh, wow. That is a surprise.
Right? So I've got Miami at 6, Cleveland at 5, New York at 4, Boston at 3, Milwaukee at
3.
I've got Boston at 3. Kristaps Porzingis is going to be out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Horford's 38 years old. They're an injury away at center from being dangerously thin. I also think that they're not going to be as gung-ho about winning a bunch of regular season games as they were last year. I think they have the talent to potentially just roll their way to the number 1 seed. I mean, they did last year. They were 14 games ahead of the Knicks for that 2 spot. I just think that Milwaukee and Philadelphia are both going to be a lot better this regular season. They're going to win a lot more games. So I got Milwaukee number 2 and Philadelphia number 1. Obviously, I could
fourth,
be wrong.
right?
I'm just making predictions. What?
Yeah, the Knicks 4th.
Yep. So
yeah, it's an interesting list there.
Give me yours, and then we can kind of talk it through.
Yeah, I not too different. Toronto with the 10th seed for me.
Yep.
And I've got the Hawks at the 9th seed. And then, unfortunately, I have Heat at the 8th seed. Just too many question marks about this group. Yeah, despite my optimism about the team. Again, maybe I'm the problem because I've fallen into that same trap of believing, well, maybe they can flip the switch or something like that. But I don't know how to predict how the season's going to shape up, given Jimmy's concerns, age, injury always being a factor. If they can somehow find a way to reverse course or just not be the team that they've been for the last few seasons, I'd love to see it, but I just don't know if that's realistic either. So they're my 8th seed. At the 7th seed, I've got the Magic again, so 7, 8. And then I've got Indiana at 6, Cleveland at 5. I've got Milwaukee at 4. Not to any fault of theirs. I believe that they'll be better. I just think they'll still be the 4th seed. I think the vibes in New York won't carry them to a lot of playoff wins, but I do think that they'll push them through the regular season grind. So I've got them 3rd overall. I still think the Celtics without Porzingis are still going to be good enough. And you know how they're not going to be as serious. And I agree with you 100% that they're not going to be looking at a random game X in February and be like, yeah, we got to win this one or prove anything after what they did last year. But they're still good enough to find a way to win those. And I think you can never count out, Joe Mazzulla trying to find whatever reference from the town to get them all fired up.
John Corrales' interview with him?
Nor will I. Out of
really?
Spite. Yeah, I don't. Out of spite.
No,
I don't.
Person, man. I love.
Yeah,
I really do love listening to him talk. If you love listening to Eric Spoelstra,
ironically, right? Please tell me it's ironically. Okay.
No, I do.
But it's got to be like ironically, right? Because it seems like self-help book guru / self-appointed dojo gibberish sometimes. It's like,
it's just entertaining. I'm not saying that like I want June Mazzulla to be my father. I just want him to be like, I just love listening to him talk. It's always gonna be something unexpected. It's not your usual coach speak. That's all. I'm easily entertained, David. You know this.
Okay. If you're counting it as coach speak, better than the grind. We got to figure it out day to day.
I don't want to listen to that anymore.
I
want to listen to him talk about killer whales. Like that's fun to me.
What does he say? What has he said about killer whales? I'm curious.
He loves killer whales, and he loves killer whales because they're an underrated predator, and that the food chain is
the
ultimate
apex predator. Yes.
They're an underrated predator, and he thinks that the animal kingdom is the ultimate meritocracy on the planet. Like that's money, dude. Like I will listen to some guy talk about that kind of. That's great. That's great. Give credit where it's due. You can't just be a hater.
Maybe. Yes, I can. Don't tell me what to do.
That's true. That's true. Never mind.
It's taken me this far. Why not? So and then I've got Philadelphia as my 1 seed. I think.
Okay, so you and I agree on
so
that.
much hinges on Embiid's health and everything else like that, and Paul George's health. But I just feel like they have more to prove during the regular season than almost any other team in the Eastern Conference, and so you kind of have to look at it from. They have to take advantage of this new retool roster, and maybe they fold under the pressure because they acquired George and there's a big salary and everything else. But I just think they'll find a way to win more games than Boston, who might take their foot off the gas just enough, and that's how they wind up at the 2nd seed.
Yeah, I might be overrating like motivation and vibes, but that's why I had Philadelphia and Milwaukee as my top 2, just because I think both of those teams are going to go into the season with something to prove. I think Giannis is pissed. Yeah. I think he's totally upset about being overlooked, and he should be. And I think Milwaukee's just going to win a bunch of games. And I think Philadelphia, like they're a regular season win juggernaut too, right? I think we kind of forget that about them because of their playoff failings, but this is a regular season wins machine. And that's kind of what we're predicting here. So, and I think Embiid having that experience, having won gold, can now claim like, okay, I kind of got a taste of winning something, and he might be a little bit more motivated by that. I don't know how much it's ultimately going to matter, but maybe. So anyway, the point being here is that I've got Miami just sneaking in to the playoffs and not having to be in the play-in tournament. I might be forcing the Heat into the playoffs here, where I'm a little surprised I have them 6 and you're the one that has them in the play-in tournament. We're kind of doing a role reversal here because I'm usually the cynic and you're usually the optimist. But
Yeah.
I can't disagree with you about them being in the play-in tournament. I do find it a little surprising that you have both of the top teams in the Southeast in the play-in tournament. I don't know that we've ever had that. I would have to go back and look. I'm not sure, but to not have a division winner in the top 6 would be a little surprising. So I kind of looked at it as, do I think the Heat are going to win the Southeast? Yes. Do I think the winner of the Southeast is going to make a real playoff spot and not have to do it via play-in tournament? Yes. Now, to be clear, that's not a rule. I know that's very confusing to people. Like, just because you win your division, it's not like the NFL. You don't get a playoff spot right away. You still have to have a better record than the teams in front of you. But usually, if you win your division, you're going to have one of the better 6 records in your conference. Again, not a guarantee, but that's kind of where I was at. And yet, I really feel icky about having Indiana below the Heat in the standings. I don't feel good about it.
Yeah, I get it.
Is there another team that you would think, like, between like New York, Cleveland, like which is the most susceptible team to fall?
Cleveland, to me, I think it's kind of neck and neck, to be honest with you. Just because, and I made the point when we were doing our Southeast preview with Philip earlier, like the Knicks, you know, the good vibes were such a big part of last year, and Jalen Brunson was phenomenal and everything else like that. And the addition of Josh Hart and all the effort plays, but they're kind of, they're shaky from the health perspective as well. And reintroducing Julius Randle, who knows what that will do to the vibes, or whether or not they'll trade for something of value. If they do wind up moving him, if they wind up keeping him, what does that mean for this roster? So it's kind of difficult. And in Cleveland too, like you think you weathered the storm of the offseason, and it looked like it was going to be bad, right? Not only was Donovan flirting with other teams, perhaps, or potentially, or whatever. Maybe it was just overblown, but then there was, reports that Darius Garland wanted to be traded. If Donovan gets brought back, right. Jared Allen, we think he's a bum, etc. Like, if there's enough smoke there, whether it's, I don't know, again, whether it's real or not, right. It's hard to predict, because I don't know that anybody's been able to really parse through it. It just feels like that could be a very volatile situation, and especially with a first-year coach in Atkinson too. And I think his style is more of building people up than tearing people down. But at the same time, I don't know that he can get
enough damage might have been done already. I mean, all those unnamed sources basically left Jared Allen out to dry in that, what was it, The Athletic? Wrote that piece after the playoffs, how he was basically weak sauce, and it's just they called him soft. And I'm like, what the heck is happening here? And
now you got to go to Garland play with those guys 82 games this season. It's like, hey, you know what? You guys hate me. I know you hate me, or you think I'm soft, etc. I don't feel as easy getting along with you in a team playing and team bonding and activities and stuff like that.
And to your point about New York's fragility, I tried to do this without predicting injuries that haven't happened already. Obviously, Porzingis is already hurt, but New York does feel like more like they could tilt over with one injury more than a team like even Philadelphia or Milwaukee can. Like if Jalen Brunson goes down for a couple of weeks, that could tumble them down the standings. I mean, they'd have no offense. If Julius Randle, the weird part about the Mikal Bridges trade that they made and all that, that offense really relies now on Julius Randle, like a lot, as to be their second scorer. Because I don't know that they have another second scorer. I wouldn't put Bridges as like a championship level second scorer. I think he might be a third scorer, but I wouldn't put him.
We saw what happened in Brooklyn last year. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And OG Anunoby is injured every other week. And they just lost Isaiah Hartenstein, and they're going to be relying on Mitchell Robinson. If they're relying on Mitchell Robinson to start 82 games, newsflash, not going to happen. So it's they're a team that can wobble a little bit with the wrong injuries, and it would not be surprising if the Knicks ended up in the play-in tournament.
No, I agree.
And so, maybe they're another team that can tumble down. But it's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. These predictions are completely useless anyway. We're just doing stuff in early September. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Don't hold these predictions against us. We'll probably make different ones closer when the season starts. For now, follow us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.